Rain hammered the glass canopy above the downtown ATM vestibule hard enough to make the whole little enclosure sound like a drum. Camila Rowan had been standing in line for 12 minutes, heels aching, tote bag cutting into her shoulder, when the old woman in front of her fumbled her bank card for the third time. The woman looked close to 80, wrapped in a lavender coat too thin for the weather, her hands trembling as she peered at the glowing screen through bifocals spotted with rain. Behind Camila, the line shifted with the impatient rustle of people who believed their time mattered more than anyone else's. A courier checked his watch. A college kid sighed loud enough to make it theatrical. And then the tall man in the charcoal jacket stepped forward from the corner, not from the line, not from the street, but from that strange nowhere that suspicious men always seem to come from. He moved with calm confidence, the kind that could pass for politeness if you were not paying attention. He looked clean-cut but roughened at the edges, dark hair damp from the rain, jaw shadowed, shoulders broad beneath a jacket that was expensive only if you knew how to look. His voice came low and easy. "Ma'am, don't hit cancel. Let me show you the faster menu." The old woman turned to him with startled gratitude. Camila's whole body went rigid. 3 years earlier, a man with that same helpful voice had stood beside her father at a kiosk in a grocery store parking lot. 10 minutes later, half his pension had vanished. Ever since then, she noticed everything: wandering eyes, fake concern, hands that hovered too near another person's card. The stranger reached past the woman's shoulder. Camila slapped him. The sound cracked through the vestibule so sharply that even the rain seemed to pause around it. His face snapped sideways. The old woman gasped. The courier muttered, "Damn." The college kid nearly dropped his phone. Camila planted herself between the stranger and the machine, chest heaving, pulse pounding with hot, righteous fury. "Touch her card again," she said, "and I'll call the police before you can invent another excuse." For one breathless second, nobody moved. Then the man straightened slowly and brought his hand to his cheek. His eyes found hers. They were not the shifty eyes she expected. They were cool, observant, almost annoyingly steady, as if he were filing her away for later. "I wasn't stealing from her," he said. "That's exactly what a thief says." The old woman blinked from one of them to the other. "He only wanted to help." Camila softened instantly toward her. "That is how they start. They help. Then they distract. Then your money is gone by dinner." The outer door hissed open and a security guard from the branch next door hurried in, already annoyed before he knew why. "What's going on?" Camila pointed at the stranger. He was reaching for her card. The guard looked at the man, then at Camila, and sighed in the tired way men sighed when women became inconvenient in public. "Sir, were you causing trouble?" The stranger glanced at the ATM screen, then at the old woman. "No. The machine was looping her in the wrong language setting. I told her not to press cancel because it would restart the session." Almost as if to prove him right, the machine flashed back to its welcome screen. The old woman groaned. "I had it right before," she whispered. Camila refused to back down. He still should not have touched anything. "I didn't," he said. "You reached." I pointed. "Near her card. Near the menu." The guard rubbed his forehead. "Great. Wonderful. Early evening and we're doing this." The old woman clutched her purse. "I just needed $40 for my car home." The stranger looked at her again, not impatient, not offended, just focused. "Your account is probably locking because the machine timed out twice. If you go inside, the teller can reset it." The guard frowned. Branch closed at 5. The stranger's gaze shifted to the dark glass doors beside them where the bank logo glowed gold against the storm. "Funny. Website says 6. That made the guard pause. Camila noticed it too. The sign taped inside indeed read 6. The interior lights were on. 2 employees moved beyond the windows, one laughing with a phone in hand while another stacked papers at leisurely speed. The old woman's mouth trembled. Please. I can't take the bus after dark. Camila was already turning toward the branch. Then we'll ask them to do their jobs. She pushed through the vestibule into the rain, yanked open the branch door, and marched inside with the old woman beside her. The stranger followed a beat later, silent as a second thought she did not want but could not shake. The lobby smelled like lemon cleaner and stale coffee. 2 tellers stood behind the counter. A branch manager in a navy suit was leaning over a desk, laughing at something on her tablet. Nobody looked up until Camila reached the counter and slapped her palm against it. This woman needs help before she gets stranded. One teller glanced at the wall clock. We're closed. The sign says 6. We stop transactions at 5:45. It's 5:38. That got the manager's attention. She looked up slowly, smile vanishing as she took in the wet coats, the agitated old woman, and the man behind them with rain on his shoulders and a reddening mark on his cheek. Camila noticed the manager's eyes snag on him. Something sharpened there. Recognition. Concern. It vanished too quickly to name. What's the issue? The manager asked. The old woman started to explain, but her voice shook. Camila stepped in for her. Your ATM timed out. She needs $40 and a reset. The teller gave a practiced pity smile. We'll need her ID, card, and account verification. The old woman fumbled again. Camila helped her open the clasp on her purse. The stranger said nothing. He simply watched every face in the room as if the room itself were speaking. The manager's gaze moved from the old woman to Camila. Are you a customer here? That shouldn't matter. It does if you're disrupting operations. Camila almost laughed. Operations? Helping an elderly customer isn't disruption. Ignoring her is. The manager's expression cooled another degree. Sir, she said to the stranger, and you are. He met her eyes. Observing. There was something about the way he said it that made the air change. Camila felt it before she understood it. The tellers straightened. The manager's fingers tightened around her tablet. Outside, thunder rolled over the city like furniture dragged across the sky. And for the first time since she slapped him, Camila had the unnerving feeling that the man she had just offended a stranger from was not the one anyone in that room should have been worried about. The manager recovered first. Her smile returned, thinner now, polished and dangerous around the edges. Observing what, exactly? The man in the charcoal jacket glanced toward the old woman, who was still clutching her card with both hands. Whether this branch treats vulnerable customers like people or obstacles. A silence spread across the lobby so fast it felt poured. One of the tellers dropped a pen. Camila looked from the stranger to the manager and back again. He had not raised his voice. He had not flashed a badge or nameplate or lawyer's card. Yet both tellers suddenly looked like schoolchildren caught cheating off the wrong desk. The manager laughed once, brittle and overbright. I don't know who you think you are, but our branch follows policy. Policy is useful, he said. Compassion is required. Camila almost turned to stare. Nobody talked to branch managers like that unless they were very rich, very reckless, or had absolutely nothing left to lose. The old woman whispered, I don't want any trouble. Camila placed a hand lightly over hers. You're not causing it. At last the teller took the card, typed in the account number, then frowned. System note says there were repeated incorrect prompts because accessibility mode was triggered and cancelled. The stranger leaned against the counter as if that confirmed something he already knew. Triggered by. The teller swallowed. A software glitch. The manager cut in too quickly. Which has been reported. When? He asked. This afternoon. He tilted his head. Interesting. Internal logs show it started 3 days ago. Now even Camila felt the floor shift under her assumptions. The manager's jaw set. Sir, if you have some complaint, you may file it through corporate channels. Maybe I already did. The teller finished the reset and counted out $40. The old woman took the bills with the fragile relief of someone receiving medicine, not money. Thank you, she breathed. Camila turned to guide her toward the seating area so she could call a car, but the manager spoke again, all her irritation aimed at the easiest target. And you? Since you are not a customer and have assaulted someone in my vestibule, I need you to leave. Camila straightened slowly. I what? You struck a man on bank property. He was reaching for an elderly woman's card. He says he wasn't. Camila gave the stranger a sharp look. Are you pressing charges? His mouth moved like he was hiding the beginning of a smile. No. The manager's expression tightened at that answer, as if it ruined a cleaner version of the evening. Even so, this is a place of business. We don't allow scenes. Camila had spent her life being told not to make scenes. At family dinners when bills piled up. At school when boys cut lines and called it confidence. At work when male supervisors took credit and called it efficiency. Something in her simply ran out. She stepped closer to the counter. Then maybe stop creating them. Your ATM nearly stranded an elderly woman in a storm while your staff pretended the clock mattered more than she did. If that's your version of professionalism, frame it and hang it. The younger teller looked down. The older one flushed. The stranger's eyes stayed on Camila, unreadable and intent. Name? The manager asked coldly. Camila nearly gave it. Then she stopped. There was no reason to volunteer more than the bank deserved. No. The manager blinked. Excuse me. You don't need my name. You need a better branch. For one electric second, Camila thought the woman might call security again just from wounded pride. Instead, the manager smiled with that terrible softness people used when they were deciding how best to punish you later. As you wish. The old woman tugged Camila's sleeve. Dear, I'll be all right now. Camila looked down, anger breaking enough to make room for concern. Do you have someone picking you up? My neighbor is on her way. Good. She handed the woman a business card from her own wallet, one from the legal aid clinic where she worked 2 blocks away. If anyone ever pressures you with your account or asks for your PIN, call me first. The old woman read the card. You're a lawyer. On weekdays. Apparently a menace on weekends. That drew the first real laugh out of the woman. The stranger looked at the card too. Camila Rowan. She slipped it back into the woman's purse. Congratulations. You can read. His gaze returned to hers, and this time she noticed something new in it. Not offense. Interest. The manager's tablet buzzed on her desk. She glanced at the screen and went pale so fast it was almost theatrical. Her eyes snapped to the stranger. Sir, perhaps you'd like to use my office. No, he said. I prefer lobbies. They reveal more. One of the tellers looked ready to faint. The manager took a measured breath. Then perhaps introductions are in order. Perhaps. She forced her shoulders back. I am Denise Harrow, branch manager. He nodded once, as though confirming a name on a list. Camila crossed her arms. Rainwater still dripped from her coat hem onto the polished floor. She was suddenly aware of how absurd the scene had become. She had come in to protect a stranger's savings and somehow walked into a room where a random man with a slap mark on his face had reduced bank employees to statues. Denise turned to Camila with formal contempt. Ms. Rowan, your involvement is no longer needed. The stranger disagreed before Camila could answer. I think it is. Denise froze. Camila frowned. Why would my involvement be needed? He reached into the inside pocket of his jacket. For half a second she thought he might produce an ID. Instead he pulled out a folded paper, rain-spotted but crisp, and placed it on the counter between them. Denise's eyes dropped to it and widened. Camila leaned in enough to catch the heading. Internal Audit, Unscheduled Service Integrity Review. Below that, in black type, was the name Julian Mercer. The old woman gasped softly. One teller whispered, "Oh God." Camila looked up. "You're an auditor?" Julian's mouth tilted. "Among other things." Denise found her voice. "Mr. Mercer, had we known you were coming, that would have ruined the point." Camila stared at him, then at the fading red print of her hand across his cheek. Heat climbed her neck. Not embarrassment exactly. Something more complicated. She had slapped a man in the middle of his own test and still could not decide whether to apologize or double down. Julian folded the paper again. "Ms. Rowan, would you mind staying a few minutes longer?" "Why?" "Because you were the first person tonight to do the right thing before knowing who might reward you for it." The lobby went utterly still. And Denise Harrow looked at Camila the way people looked at sparks in dry grass, suddenly aware that a small, inconvenient thing might burn much larger ones. Camila should have left. That was the sensible choice. She had no account at Mercer National. She had a case file waiting on her apartment table, a landlord who believed rent reminders were a form of poetry, and exactly one clean blazer left for Monday. Staying inside a bank lobby because a mysterious internal auditor said she mattered was not a rational decision. But rationality had never once made a story worth remembering. So she stayed. Denise led the elderly woman to a chair and instructed a teller to call her ride. The younger employees moved with the jerky urgency of people who had just realized they might be judged for every shrug they had ever given. The storm outside deepened, gray washing to black beyond the windows until the city looked like a reflection in wet stone. Julian stood near the customer service desk, one hand in his pocket, studying the branch with unnerving patience. Up close, he was even more difficult to categorize. He looked too self-possessed for middle management, too observant for security, too casually dressed for most executives. The expensive watch on his wrist was hidden beneath an ordinary cuff. His shoes were polished but rain-marked. If wealth had a uniform, his version wore it like a man trying not to be recognized by it. Camila hated that she noticed. "You could have told me who you were before I hit you," she muttered. He glanced at her. "Would that have changed your decision?" "No." "Then my cheek and your conscience can both survive." She almost smiled, then remembered she was annoyed. "You let me look insane." "You looked brave." The answer landed harder than it should have. Denise reappeared, smoothing invisible wrinkles from her suit jacket. "Mr. Mercer, my office is available now." Julian did not move. "Let's stay here." "As you wish." Her politeness had become so stiff it was practically architecture. He turned to Camila. "What made you react so fast at the ATM?" "Pattern recognition." "Meaning?" "My father lost money to a card switch scam after someone helped him at a machine." She used air quotes sharp enough to cut. By the time he realized what happened, the bank said the withdrawals were authorized. Julian's gaze sharpened. "Which bank?" She gave a humorless laugh. "Take a guess." The tellers suddenly found the counters fascinating. Julian's expression did not change, but something colder settled into it. "How much?" 32,000. Denise stepped in too quickly. "I'm sure that matter was investigated." Camila looked at her. "It was denied." Julian's tone stayed mild. "Date?" 2 years, 8 months ago." Denise inhaled to object, then thought better of it. A man in a maintenance polo emerged from a back hallway carrying a toolbox. He stopped when he saw Julian, then straightened as if an invisible string had tugged him. "Sir." Julian nodded once. "You saw the ATM logs?" "Yes, sir. Accessibility bug was flagged Tuesday morning." Julian let the silence after that statement stretch until it became a verdict. And yet customers were still not being redirected properly. The man looked at Denise, then down. Manager said replacements would hurt monthly numbers because the vestibule unit has the highest transaction volume. Camila turned slowly toward Denise. Denise's voice went sharp. That is not what I said. The maintenance worker seemed to shrink. You said not to disable it until after quarter close. A beat of stillness. Then Julian asked, did you document that instruction? Email and service ticket note, sir. Camila watched Denise's face lose color by degrees. It was almost artistic. Julian finally took a step toward the office, but only to set his hand on the glass door without entering. Ms. Harrow, I want branch email records, service logs, customer complaint summaries, and employee scheduling for the last 90 days. Denise forced a smile. Tonight? Now. The older teller spoke up carefully. Mr. Mercer, system archive access requires regional authorization after 6. Julian pulled a phone from his pocket and placed one call. He did not raise his voice. He did not introduce himself with dramatic flourish. He simply said, unlock Harrow branch archival access. Full review tier. A pause. Yes. Effective immediately. He ended the call and slipped the phone away. The teller turned to his terminal. Whatever he saw there made him sit straighter. Camila folded her arms. You really enjoy making people sweat. I enjoy seeing what only appears under pressure. That's a very polished way to say the same thing. His eyes flicked to her mouth, then back to her eyes, as if he had almost smiled and decided against it. And you enjoy saying the sharp thing instead of the safe one. The safe one is usually a lie. For the first time, his expression softened. Not enough to be warm. Enough to be real. Denise cleared her throat. Ms. Rowan, unless you have official business with the bank. She does now, Julian said. Camila blinked. I do. He faced her fully. You have first-hand experience with a fraud case this institution mishandled. You also just witnessed service failure in real time. If you're willing, I'd like you to sit in while I review initial findings. Denise stared at him. A civilian cannot join an internal audit. Julian's reply came without force and therefore without mercy. I own the bank. The room forgot how to breathe. Even Camila, who had already concluded he was more important than he looked, had not leaped that far. You what? Denise's voice thinned to almost nothing. Mr. Mercer is chairman. The courier from the ATM vestibule, who had wandered in to escape the rain and curiosity, made a choking sound near the brochure stand. Camila turned back to Julian slowly, absurdly conscious of the slap mark that now seemed less like an accident and more like a career-limiting event. You're the owner. Majority owner, technically. And you were testing your own branch. Yes. And I slapped you. Also yes. The silence after that was so complete it bordered on sacred. Then, to Camila's horror, the old woman in the chair began to laugh. It started as a weak little wheeze and grew until everyone in the lobby looked at her. She wiped at her eyes. Good. Somebody should. Julian surprised Camila again by laughing too. Low, brief, genuine. The tension broke just enough for humanity to return. Camila ran a hand through damp hair. This is ridiculous. Frequently, truth arrives dressed that way, he said. Denise had recovered enough to try strategy. Mr. Mercer, surely this is not the environment for a prolonged review. Perhaps we can arrange a formal meeting tomorrow at headquarters. No. Julian kept his attention on Camila. If she agrees, I want her perspective tonight. Camila's instincts warred inside her. Stay out of rich men's battles. Never volunteer for institutions. Do not let powerful people turn your pain into a talking point. Yet another voice, older and fiercer, rose above them all. The one that sounded like her father after the scam, staring at denial letters with his pride cut open. If someone had listened the first time, maybe it would not happen again. She exhaled. Fine. 1 hour. Julian inclined his head. Thank you. Denise's smile cracked almost invisibly. As the branch lights reflected in the wet black windows and the storm sealed them into that bright artificial island, Camila followed a billionaire she had slapped into the conference room of the bank that had failed her family. And for reasons she did not yet understand, that felt less like entering a meeting than crossing the first line of a war. The conference room was too cold, too bright, and designed by someone who believed trust could be manufactured with frosted glass and polished walnut. A framed slogan on the wall declared people first in silver letters. Camila had to look away before she said something obscene to the decor. Julian took the chair at the head of the table without ceremony. Not because he wanted the power seat, she realized, but because the room had arranged itself around him long before he sat down. Denise took the far side near the monitor. The two tellers hovered with files. A regional access window blinked open on the screen. Somewhere in another tower, another office, another person had just learned that Julian Mercer was reviewing a branch in person after business hours and was probably deciding whether to panic or spin. Camila chose a chair against the wall. Julian noticed. Come closer. I'm not staff. No. You're the only one here without performance incentives. That earned him a sharp glance from Denise and a reluctant move from Camila. She took the seat halfway down the table, close enough to see the spreadsheets loading across the monitor. Complaint logs. Fee reversal requests. Elderly customer escalations. Product conversion targets. It was all there, the private skeleton of a public smile. Julian steepled his fingers. Start with accessibility complaints. The older teller, whose name tag read Martin, cleared his throat and pulled up a dashboard. 32 reported incidents in 90 days. Camila stared. At one branch? Martin winced. Formally reported. Julian's voice stayed level. Unofficially. Martin looked miserable. Hard to say. Denise cut in. Many are duplicates. Customers often misunderstand machine prompts, especially with audio assistance enabled. Camila leaned forward. Is that the phrase you use in training? Customers misunderstand. That's convenient. Denise gave her a cool look. You are here as an observer, Ms. Rowan. Julian did not look up from the data. She can speak. Denise fell silent with visible effort. Martin opened another file. There were also 14 complaints regarding extended wait times for in-person cash access after vestibule failures. Julian's jaw tightened slightly. Any transport assistance offered to seniors after close? No, sir. Policy. Discretionary. Camila let out a short breath. Meaning nobody does it because it cuts into going home on time. Martin looked ashamed enough not to deny it. The younger teller, Ava, spoke up softly. Sometimes we wanted to, but Denise said if we did it once, everyone would expect exceptions. Camila turned toward her. And would that be a tragedy? Customers expecting help from a bank. Ava looked like she regretted having vocal cords. Julian shifted to another report. Cross-selling variance. Why is this branch outperforming district average by 28% on premium account conversions? Denise straightened, finding safer ground. Strong team discipline. We actively educate clients about value. Camila had worked enough intake desks in legal aid to recognize euphemisms when they dressed up for work. How many of those clients asked for premium accounts? Nobody answered immediately. Julian's eyes narrowed on the screen. How many over 65? Martin clicked twice. The number appeared. 71%. Camila sat back. You've got to be kidding. Denise folded her hands. Older clients often prefer enhanced fraud protection and concierge support. Camila could not stop herself. Older clients also trust anyone in a blazer who tells them it's safer. Denise's chin lifted. Our employees do not exploit trust. Julian rotated the monitor toward them and tapped a column. Then explain why 60% of those upgraded accounts used less than one premium feature while incurring monthly maintenance fees. Denise opened her mouth and closed it. A notification flashed in the corner of the screen. Case History Archive, Rowan, Victor. Camila's blood went cold. Open it, Julian said. She wanted to say no. Wanted to tell him that some wounds were not exhibits. But the file was already loading, and there it was, her father's fraud claim, summarized into neat sentences that stripped all grief from the event. Customer alleges unauthorized ATM assistance scam. Claim denied due to PIN-authenticated withdrawals. No branch liability established. Below that sat two internal notes. Customer appears confused regarding procedure. Recommend closure. Potential retention risk low. Limited asset profile. The room blurred around Camila for one hot second. Limited asset profile. As if losing $32,000 mattered less because you did not have more where it came from. Julian's voice went very still. Who wrote these notes? Martin swallowed. Initial review was escalated to Assistant Manager Victor Dane. He's now Regional Service Director. Camila laughed once. It came out broken. Of course he is. Julian looked at her, not with pity, which she would have hated, but with attention sharpened into something almost fierce. Was your father confused? No. She heard how flat her own voice sounded. He was humiliated. Those are different things. No one moved. She stared at the screen, at the bureaucratic neatness of the cruelty, and remembered her father sitting at their kitchen table in the same plaid robe for 2 days after the denial letter arrived. Not because he could not understand the paperwork. Because he understood it too well. It said what the world always said to people like them. You should have known better. You should have been harder to fool. You should have had enough money for the system to care. Julian closed the file himself. We're done for tonight, Denise said quickly, sensing instability and trying to turn it into escape. No, Julian said. He stood. The whole table seemed to react. Call Victor Dane. Denise hesitated. It's after hours. Then interrupt his dinner. The order landed like steel on glass. Martin dialed from the conference phone. It rang 3 times before a smooth male voice answered, irritated and distracted. This better be urgent. Julian pressed speaker. It is. A pause. Then, cautiously, Mr. Mercer. Camila felt the hair rise on her arms. You're familiar with the Rowan denial file? Julian asked. Victor did not miss a beat. Not offhand. We process thousands. Julian's gaze met Camila's for a fraction of a second before returning to the phone. Interesting. Because your note in the record recommends closure based on low retention value. Another pause, longer this time. That sounds like an internal shorthand issue, not intent. Camila's nails dug into her palm. Julian's voice stayed calm enough to terrify. Come to Harrow Branch. Tonight? Now. Victor exhaled softly, probably recalculating his future in real time. I can be there in 30. 20. The line disconnected. Denise looked genuinely alarmed now. Mr. Mercer, with respect, escalating one old claim in front of branch staff is irregular. Julian turned to her. What you call irregular, I call visible. Camila should have felt triumphant. Instead she felt unsteady, as though the floor beneath her old bitterness had cracked and revealed something larger underneath, not a single injustice, but a system designed to translate harm into spreadsheets until nobody recognized it as harm at all. Julian seemed to read part of that from her face. You can leave if this is too much. She lifted her chin. No. I stayed this long. Good. Just one word. Yet it settled into her with a weight she was not prepared for. Outside, the storm finally began to ease, rain thinning from rage to whisper against the glass. Inside the conference room, the air had changed from procedural to personal. Someone was coming. A man from an old wound. A man who had once written off her father's loss as a low-value inconvenience. And Camilla realized that whatever happened next would not just reopen the past. It would decide who got to define it. Victor Dane arrived 19 minutes later in a navy overcoat and the expression of a man rehearsing innocence in the elevator. Camilla recognized him before the conference room door fully opened. The hair was grayer now, the jaw softer, but the smile was the same, polished, sympathetic, faintly bored. It was the smile he had worn across a desk 2 years ago while telling her father there was nothing the bank could do. A sorry smile. A trained smile. The kind that made cruelty sound administrative. His gaze swept the room, cataloging Julian at the head of the table, Denise near the monitor, Martin and Ava rigid by the credenza, and finally Camilla. Recognition flickered, then vanished behind professionalism. Mr. Mercer, he said smoothly. I came as quickly as I could. Julian did not invite him to sit. Explain the Rowan file. Victor placed a leather portfolio on the table and rested both hands on the back of a chair. A routine scam claim from several years back. PIN authorized withdrawals, no video evidence, no reversal basis under policy at the time. Camilla's laugh cut in before she meant to give it life. There was video evidence. I asked for it. Victor turned toward her with a measured frown of fake recollection. Ms. Rowan, wasn't it? I understand emotions were high. Don't you dare call my father's humiliation an emotion problem. Victor's expression did not break, but his eyes hardened around the edges. No one is dismissing his distress. You already did. In writing. Julian spoke before Victor could pivot. Why was a fraud case flagged as low retention value? Victor spread his hands. Legacy shorthand. We used internal codes to prioritize remediation resources. Not ideal wording, perhaps, but not malicious. Martin looked down so sharply Camilla knew the answer before he spoke. It wasn't legacy shorthand, he said quietly. Regional started pushing value tiers 18 months before that claim. Victor's head snapped toward him. You don't understand context. Martin flushed but kept speaking. We were told premium households got proactive review, while low balance accounts required stronger evidence. Camilla stared at Julian, expecting shock. Instead she saw something worse, confirmation. As if he had feared this and come in person because he no longer trusted sanitized reports. Victor turned back to Julian quickly. That guidance was about efficiency, not fairness. Efficiency at whose expense? Camilla asked. Victor ignored her. That, more than anything, reignited the fire in her chest. Men like him had spent whole careers perfecting the art of speaking around women who knew too much. Julian did not let him answer her. Victor's jaw tightened. The industry has to allocate investigative resources. Camilla leaned forward. Say it clearly. Poor customers were too expensive to protect. Denise shifted uncomfortably. Ava looked near tears. Victor finally sat, though nobody had offered. This is becoming theatrical. Julian rested one hand flat on the table. No. It is becoming honest. For the first time, a crack appeared in Victor's composure. He looked at Julian not as a distant executive but as a threat that had moved from abstract to immediate. If this is about image management, we can address exposure quietly. Camilla turned toward him. Image management? Let's not pretend, Victor said, voice cooling. Banks settle these matters all the time without performative outrage. The word performative did it. Camila stood so fast her chair legs scraped the floor. My father sold his truck to keep the lights on after that theft. He skipped his medication for months because the copay scared him. Do not stand there in a wool coat and call this performative. Victor looked taken aback, maybe because pain sounded different when it refused to stay tidy. Julian rose too, not to calm her but to match the gravity of the room. How many denials were routed under value tier logic? Victor hesitated. Julian's next words landed with precision. That was not a rhetorical question. Victor exhaled. I don't know exact numbers. Martin opened another report with shaking hands. I do. Everyone turned. Martin swallowed. I checked when the review started. Claims coded discretionary low-value closure in this district over 3 years, 187. Camila felt the number like a blow. 187 families told their losses mattered less. Victor recovered enough to attempt a strategic retreat. Those were not all wrongful denials. No, Julian said. Just enough to poison the whole barrel. The conference room door opened again. A woman in a camel coat stepped in, silver hair pinned neatly at the nape of her neck, tablet in hand, eyes sharp as winter. She took in the room at once. Julian. Aunt Eleanor. Camila glanced between them. Eleanor Mercer. She knew the name from business pages clipped in dentist offices and articles people shared when they wanted proof that dynasties still ruled modern life. Vice Chair. Interim architect of 3 mergers. Called steel wrapped in silk by a finance magazine that probably thought it was flattering. Eleanor's gaze brushed Camila, paused at Julian's cheek, then moved on without comment. Legal is mobilizing. So is communications. If you're blowing open a district review at branch level, I need to know whether we're containing or cleansing. Camila almost choked on the sentence. Julian's answer came immediately. Cleansing. Eleanor studied him for one long moment. Good. That surprised everyone, including Victor. She set her tablet down and looked at the screen. How bad? Martin answered before anyone else could spin. Potentially systemic. Eleanor nodded once. Then nobody leaves, nobody calls outside counsel privately, and nobody edits a record. IT has mirrored the district servers. Victor went white. Denise sat down abruptly. Camila stared at this elegant older woman and saw the family resemblance at last, not in features, but in stillness under pressure. Eleanor turned to Camila. You are Camila Rowan. The older woman's eyes sharpened. The Rowan file. Camila felt suddenly exposed. You know it? I know Julian flagged it from archive pull because he almost broke a glass table reading the internal notes. The room went silent again. Camila looked at Julian. He did not deny it. Something warm and dangerous moved through her before she could stop it. Eleanor continued, brisk and unsentimental. Ms. Rowan, if what happened to your family reflects a broader practice, you may have helped uncover the most expensive moral failure this bank has faced in years. Victor tried one last pivot. Or we may be inflating procedural imperfections into a media crisis. Eleanor's smile held no warmth. Procedural imperfections do not usually come with value-based denial codes. Julian looked at Camila. You asked earlier whether I enjoy making people sweat. No. What I enjoy is the moment excuses stop working. Camila should not have noticed how the overhead light caught in the storm-dark blue of his eyes. She should not have liked that he sounded angrier on behalf of strangers than most powerful men sounded on behalf of themselves. She definitely should not have remembered, at exactly the wrong moment, the steadiness of his hand near the ATM when she thought he was a criminal. But attraction was rarely polite enough to wait for suitable timing. Eleanor began issuing orders. Audit expansion. Claims freeze. Customer restitution review. Independent hotline. Victor, stripped of language, sat with his face draining by degrees. Denise looked like she wanted the floor to open. Camila sank back into her chair, pulse uneven. The night had begun with rain, an ATM line, and a slap. Now she was sitting inside the private machinery of a banking empire while its owners pulled apart the gears with her father's name still glowing on a screen. And somewhere beneath her anger, beneath her caution, beneath every hard lesson she had learned about powerful men, an impossible thought began to form. What if this one had actually come looking for the truth? By midnight the branch looked less like a place of business and more like a command center hastily built inside a polished lie. Outside, the storm had passed and left the city rinsed and shining. Inside, half the conference room wall was now covered with printed timelines, complaint clusters, and district hierarchy maps. IT had remote access running on 2 monitors. Eleanor spoke in crisp, bloodless sentences that made executives on speakerphones sound like defendants. Martin kept producing data with the desperate precision of a man trying to save whatever remained of his conscience. Ava made coffee for everyone because it was the only useful thing she could do without crying. Camila should have gone home hours ago. Instead she stood at the edge of the map wall with a yellow marker in hand while Julian watched her connect dates between reported ATM failures and fee-based account conversions. It spikes after each accessibility complaint cluster, she said. Customers come inside frustrated, confused, vulnerable. That's the perfect moment to sell them a protection upgrade. Julian nodded. Fear conversion. Camila underlined the phrase so hard the marker squeaked. Predatory and elegant. Whoever designed it knew exactly how shame works. His gaze shifted to her face. Explain. She capped the marker. People hate admitting they don't understand financial systems. Especially older customers. Especially proud ones. If the machine embarrasses them first, they'll agree to almost anything that sounds like security, speed, or dignity. He held her eyes for a second too long. You understand people well. I understand what institutions do to them. Eleanor stepped away to take another call. The room noise dimmed. For the first time all night, Camila and Julian stood in a pocket of stillness not filled by other witnesses. He looked tired now. Not weaker. More human. His tie, which had appeared at some point during the evening from nowhere, was loosened. The red print of her hand had faded to a pale memory on his cheek. A ridiculous part of her was glad. You can still leave, he said quietly. You keep offering that like you want me to say no. Maybe I do. That landed between them with no room left to pretend it was innocent. Camila crossed her arms, partly for protection. Why? Because everyone else in this room speaks either from fear or obligation. He glanced toward the tables of files and laptops. You speak like the outcome matters. It does matter. Yes. His voice lowered. I know. She looked away first. A phone buzzed on the table. Eleanor returned, expression grim. District Council is trying to reach Victor through a private line. I want his devices. Victor, who had spent the last hour under watch in Denise's office, was escorted back in by security and surrendered his phone with bad grace. His confidence had curdled into resentment. This is a public relations circus, he said. We are destabilizing trust over edge cases. Camila turned so sharply her chair wheels bumped the table. 187 edge cases. Victor gave her a cool glance. Anecdotes are not systems. Julian answered him. Patterns are. The next 2 hours peeled back more than anyone except Julian had expected. Branch scorecards rewarded premium upgrades after service failures. Complaint reversals were tracked against employee bonus pools. Internal coaching scripts instructed staff to reframe anxiety as an opportunity for product education. At 2 in the morning, Martin uncovered an email chain with Victor's signature on a pilot initiative called Retention Stratification. Translation: Save valuable households first. Eleanor read the screen and went very quiet. You named it. Victor bristled. Internal pilot language is not proof of misconduct. It is when paired with denials and fee extraction. Camila should have felt vindicated. Instead she felt sick. Her father's story, which had lived in her mind as a private family wound, kept widening into a pattern big enough to have a budget line and rollout strategy. Around 2:30, Ava finally broke. She sat down hard and covered her face. I knew some of it felt wrong, she whispered. I just kept telling myself I was new. Camila walked over and handed her the untouched cup of coffee she had been holding. That is how bad systems survive. They make decency feel inexperienced. Ava looked up at her like she might remember that sentence for years. Julian watched the exchange. Would you ever say yes to consulting work? Camila blinked. What? Eleanor looked up too, interested now. Julian stepped closer, one hand braced against the back of a chair. You read exploitation patterns instinctively. You understand legal language and customer psychology. Most people in my compliance teams understand only one of those. Camila let out a short disbelieving laugh. Are you recruiting me at 2:30 in the morning in the middle of an institutional scandal? I'm considering it. That's unhinged. I've had an unusual evening. She stared at him. You cannot hire women you meet after they slap you. Is that a formal statute or a personal preference? Against all reason, she laughed. Eleanor's mouth almost curved. For the record, I support unconventional recruitment if it improves the company. Camila rubbed her forehead. Fatigue was making everything surreal. I have a job. A legal aid intake role that underpays you and burns you out, Julian said. She narrowed her eyes. Did you investigate me too? No. You told an elderly stranger in a rainstorm that you work legal aid and carry your own business cards. That combination already says too much. The answer irritated her because it was clever and accurate. Even if I wanted a different job, I would not become the redemption accessory in a billionaire's reform narrative. Something changed in Julian's expression then. The lightness left it. I wouldn't ask you to be an accessory. The room continued moving around them, but the sentence landed in private. Camila felt suddenly, strangely off balance. Before she could answer, Eleanor called them back to the table. A decision memo was being drafted: district investigation expansion, immediate suspension of Victor Dane, temporary leave for Denise, restitution reserve establishment, independent review panel, and direct outreach to affected customers. Victor stood. You'll regret overreacting to this. Julian looked at him with a calm so complete it became chilling. No. I'll regret not seeing it sooner. At 3:15, the first draft of the customer remediation letter appeared on the screen. It was full of legal cushioning and almost apologies. Camila read half a paragraph and shook her head. This is terrible. Eleanor arched a brow. In what way? It sounds like you're sorry the issue occurred, not sorry people were harmed. It sounds like you regret inconvenience, not betrayal. Julian pulled the document toward her. Rewrite it. Camila froze. Right now? Yes. She looked around the table. Nobody objected. Even Eleanor looked curious. So Camila sat, cracked her knuckles, and began typing. Not corporate sorrow. Not diluted language. Real sentences. We failed customers who trusted us. We prioritized metrics over care. We denied some claims under standards that did not reflect our values or obligations. We are reviewing every impacted case. We are contacting affected customers directly. We are establishing restitution and independent oversight. When she finished, the room had gone silent again. Eleanor read the draft slowly, then nodded once. Use this. Julian's gaze stayed on Camilla. That's what accountability sounds like. She should have deflected. Instead, exhausted and raw, she met his eyes and said the first honest thing that rose. No. That's what accountability begins to sound like. You still have to prove it in daylight. Something like admiration moved across his face. And as dawn approached the city in pale silver bands beyond the glass, Camilla realized that the night was no longer about exposing rot. It was about what came after exposure, when repair was harder than outrage and far more revealing. Daylight made everything less cinematic and more dangerous. Scandals looked heroic at 2 in the morning and litigious by 8. By sunrise, the Harrow branch had been emptied of ordinary customers and filled with specialists, forensic auditors, external counsel, systems analysts, and 2 exhausted communications directors who looked offended by reality. Denise had been placed on administrative leave pending investigation. Victor was escorted out through a side exit after refusing to sign an access waiver without personal counsel. Martin remained, pale but cooperative. Ava had gone home crying and apologizing to people who did not deserve her apology. Camilla sat on a bench outside the branch beneath a row of planters glistening from the storm. She held a paper cup of coffee that had gone cold 20 minutes ago and felt the kind of fatigue that made memory and present tense smear at the edges. Taxis hissed through damp streets. Office workers began to appear in pressed shirts and purposeful shoes, unaware that behind the gold bank logo an empire was cauterizing a wound it had hidden too long. The glass door opened. Julian stepped out, jacket over one shoulder. You should be home asleep. So should you. He sat beside her, leaving a respectful span of wood between them that somehow felt more intimate than closeness. For a minute neither spoke. Camilla watched the city wake. When did you know? About the denial tears? He asked. About the bank? Really no. He leaned back, face tipped toward the paling sky. I knew isolated things. Complaint anomalies. Regional metrics that rewarded behavior I disliked but couldn't fully trace. My grandfather built Mercer National on neighborhood trust. Over the last decade it became efficient in all the ways markets applaud and people fear. I kept thinking I could steer it from the top with better dashboards. And dashboards lie politely. He glanced at her. Lobbies do not. She turned the cold cup between her palms. You shouldn't say things like that. They make you sound reflective. He gave a tired half-smile. A terrible reputation for a banker. She surprised herself by smiling back. A black SUV pulled to the curb across the street. Another followed. Men and women in expensive coats stepped out with the hungry restraint of people who smelled news. Communications directors stiffened inside the branch. Camilla cursed softly. Media. Julian did not look surprised. Someone leaked. Victor? Possibly. Or someone protecting themselves by becoming helpful early. Is this the part where your people build a wall and call it strategic transparency? No. He stood. This is the part where I decide whether to hide behind one. He looked down at her. Will you come inside? That question should not have mattered. Yet it did, because he did not ask like a man summoning an ally or a witness. He asked like a man who wanted one true voice in a room built from careful ones. Camilla set the cold coffee aside and stood. Fine. But if your public relations team uses the phrase customer journey, I may commit a second assault. His laugh was low and sudden. I'll try to protect my staff. Inside, the branch had transformed again. Cameras were being positioned outside the doors. Press statements printed. Legal objections whispered. Eleanor stood near the conference room glass reading updates while 3 board members joined by secure video from headquarters, each wearing a version of concern filtered through self-preservation. The oldest board member, Warren Bell, appeared first on screen, silver tie perfectly centered. Julian, this requires containment. We acknowledge operational irregularities, suspend a few managers, announce review, and move discussion to quarter end. Camila, standing near the back, felt her whole body go cold. Julian remained standing. No. Another board member frowned. No. No containment without full disclosure. Warren's eyes narrowed. Markets punish uncertainty. Eleanor answered before Julian could. Markets punish deception more. Warren ignored her. Who is that? He meant Camila. Julian did not turn. A citizen, your institution failed. Every head in the room shifted toward her then, some curious, some irritated, one openly calculating. She hated how easily powerful rooms tried to reduce living people into illustrative examples. Warren's tone cooled. This is not a town hall. Camila spoke anyway. No. If it were, your customers would be allowed in. The communications director made a choking noise. Eleanor looked almost pleased. Warren stared at Julian. You're letting outsiders shape governance now. Julian's reply came with frightening simplicity. I'm letting reality into the room. A legal advisor murmured that live cameras were assembling. Reporters had likely already connected the overnight audit to district managers and branch closures. Social chatter was surging. Video of the ATM slap had surfaced from someone's phone. Camila closed her eyes for 1 second. Of course it had. One of the PR directors looked mortified. The clip is everywhere. Captioned as Woman Attacks Banker Scammer, then updated as Woman Slaps Unknown Executive. There's narrative volatility. Camila muttered, narrative volatility is a very rich way to describe humiliation. Julian looked at her. Do you want us to suppress it? She almost said yes on reflex. Then she imagined the old woman at the ATM. Her father at the kitchen table. The 187 files. No. Let people see the beginning if they also get to see the truth. His expression changed, subtle but unmistakable. Respect, yes. Something warmer too. Warren spoke again, impatient. Whatever theater we're indulging, it ends now. Issue the moderated statement and move this to legal. Julian faced the screen. We are announcing restitution review, independent oversight, district suspension actions, and direct customer outreach today. You don't have board approval. I have controlling shares. Silence. Camila felt the room tense around the sentence. There it was, the hard core beneath the reflective surface. Not just conscience. Power. Used plainly. Warren's face sharpened. Your father would never have handled this by indulging sentiment. Julian went very still. That is one of several reasons I am not using his playbook. The screen flickered as another member disconnected. Then another. Warren remained only long enough to say, if this affects valuation, it will be remembered. Julian's voice did not rise. Good. The feed ended. For a moment nobody moved. Then Eleanor exhaled and began assigning next steps. Camila should have felt small in that room, a tired woman in wrinkled clothes beside board members and crisis teams. Instead she felt strangely steady. Perhaps because wealth no longer looked abstract. It looked like choice. Like who got helped, who got denied, who got told to wait, who got told they were low value, and who decided whether daylight would reveal or conceal. Julian approached her once the others dispersed toward their tasks. I have to go outside in 10 minutes. For the press statement. Yes. Then say human words. His mouth curved. You remain very demanding for someone who hit me first. That was before I knew you were a billionaire. And now? She met his eyes. Now I know you're one on purpose. The air between them shifted again, tight and bright as a wire-catching sun. Before either could step closer to that truth, Eleanor called from across the lobby, "Julian. Cameras are live." He looked at Camila one last second. "Stay." It was not an order. It sounded more dangerous than one. And as the doors opened to a wall of microphones and morning light, Camila understood that the next test would not be hidden in branch logs or internal notes. It would happen in public, where truth had to survive performance and power had to speak before it could retreat. The press conference lasted 11 minutes and changed the temperature of the entire city. Julian did not hide behind the podium. He stood in front of it, rain-washed stone and gleaming glass behind him, cameras fixed on the fading shadow of Camila's hand across a cheek that had already become internet folklore. He spoke without teleprompter, without legal padding, without the corporate sedation people usually mistook for responsibility. Mercer National had failed customers. A district review had revealed unacceptable service practices. Certain claims had been denied under standards that did not reflect the institution's obligations. Independent investigators were being engaged. Customer restitution would be pursued. Senior personnel had been suspended. More findings would follow. He did not say mistake when he meant harm. He did not say inconvenience when he meant betrayal. Inside the branch, the communications directors looked physically unwell. Camila watched from behind the glass with Eleanor beside her. The older woman folded her arms and said, almost thoughtfully, "He sounds like his mother when he's furious." Camila turned. His mother? Painter. Philanthropist. Catastrophically honest. Eleanor's mouth softened for a rare second. The family mistook it for impracticality. Camila looked back outside. Julian fielded questions with unnerving control. Was this a systemic abuse model? Potentially. Were customers financially harmed? Yes. How many executives were implicated? The review was ongoing. Had he known before now? Not enough, and not soon enough. That answer lodged in Camila's chest because it cost him something to say it publicly. When the conference ended, the city answered immediately. Commentators praised transparency, mocked the ATM slap, dissected governance risk, and demanded names. Phone lines surged. Former customers began sharing stories online. Not dozens. Hundreds. Misleading upgrades. Unexplained fees. Dismissed fraud reports. Told you must have approved it. Told you should have read better. Told you nothing could be done. By noon, what had started as a branch review had become a national reckoning for the bank. And by 1 o'clock, Camila had become collateral. Her phone began vibrating non-stop in her tote. Unknown numbers. Local reporters. Former colleagues from law school who never called unless gossip had market value. Her clinic supervisor asking if she was safe. A text from her landlord that simply read, "You on TV?" Then came the message that made her stomach drop. A private number. No greeting. People who chase headlines often get buried under them. She showed it to Julian in the temporary operations room now set up on the second floor. He read it once, face unreadable. "Victor?" she asked. Maybe someone protecting him. I knew staying would get ugly. He handed the phone back carefully, as if returning not an object but agency. "You can still step away." She almost laughed at the repetition. Do billionaires have a phrase of the day calendar? Only for emergencies. The corner of her mouth twitched despite herself. A security advisor entered with 2 tablets and a grim expression. More leaks had surfaced. Someone had circulated selective excerpts of internal emails suggesting Camila had been invited in as a pre-planned activist voice. Warren Bell's office was quietly briefing market reporters that Julian was overreacting from personal guilt. Social media had split into warring camps: bank reform hero, reckless heir, staged scandal, violent woman rewarded for public assault. Camila stared at one headline and felt heat rise under her skin. ATM slapper may be secret consultant. Wonderful, she muttered. I always wanted a villain origin story. Julian took the tablet, jaw hardening. This narrative came from inside. Eleanor glanced over the screen. Bell's people. They want the governance fight framed before the board meeting. Camilla looked up. Board meeting? Julian nodded. Emergency session. 4 o'clock. About the scandal? About me. The simplicity of that answer sharpened everything. He thinks he can use the fallout to weaken your control. He thinks outrage makes leverage. Camilla paced once across the room. Fatigue had burned away, leaving her too clear and too angry. Then he won't just come for you. He'll come for the story. For whether this was real. Julian's eyes stayed on her. Yes. There it was again, that unnerving habit he had of answering the hard truth without cushioning it. Eleanor stepped closer. Ms. Rowan, I dislike asking this because it is manipulative by nature, but your presence may matter this afternoon. Camilla laughed in disbelief. You want me in the boardroom? I want a human cost in front of men who reduce everything to exposure curves. Camilla turned to Julian. And what do you want? His answer came after a beat. I want you only there if it remains your choice. Choice. He kept returning to that word without dressing it up, and each time it cut through her defenses in a new place. She looked at the window where the city glared back in white afternoon light. The easy thing would be to leave before richer people turned her into a symbol and then argued over branding rights. The wiser thing, perhaps. But Wise had never helped her father. Wise had never reopened a closed claim. Wise had never walked an old woman into a bank and forced somebody to care. Fine, she said. I'll come. The Mercer National Boardroom occupied the top floor of headquarters and appeared to have been built by a committee of expensive egos. The view stretched over the river like ownership. The table was long enough to imply ancient grudges. Screens glowed at both ends. Assistants moved like hushed weather. Warren Bell was already there when they arrived, silver hair immaculate, expression arranged into grandfatherly concern. 2 other directors sat nearby. Lawyers lined one wall. Camilla took one step inside and immediately understood that the room had been engineered to make ordinary people feel temporary. Good, she thought. Let it fail. Warren rose. Julian. Miss Rowan. The way he said her name made it sound borrowed. Julian did not sit. Let's begin. What followed was not a meeting. It was elegant warfare. Warren argued that Julian's public admissions had exposed the bank to unnecessary liability. Another director suggested immediate settlement funds without formal acknowledgement of wrongdoing. A third proposed a special committee that somehow excluded Julian from oversight while stabilization proceeded. Every sentence arrived dressed as prudence and smelling of self-protection. Then Warren turned to Camilla. Miss Rowan, we all sympathize with your family's circumstances. Camilla smiled without warmth. That is an interesting way to begin a sentence that will soon insult me. A flicker crossed Eleanor's face. Approval, maybe. Warren folded his hands. No insult intended. But institutions of this size cannot be governed by anecdote. Camilla stepped forward before lawyers could object. You keep calling people anecdote when you want permission not to feel responsible for them. Nobody interrupted. She continued, voice steady now. My father was not an anecdote. The old woman at the ATM was not an anecdote. 187 files are not anecdotes. They are patterns of harm translated into language comfortable enough for boardrooms. Warren's jaw tightened. Emotion is understandable. It is not governance. Julian answered before she could. No. But indifference disguised as governance is why we're here. The room went silent. Camilla looked at him then, really looked, and saw the decision inside him, not whether to win, but what kind of man he would have to be after winning. It changed the air. It changed her. And as Warren prepared his next careful attack, Camilla realized this was no longer just about exposing a corrupt banking practice. It was about whether truth could survive inside a room built to domesticate it. Warren tried numbers next. That was the tactic men like him trusted most. When morality became inconvenient, convert it into forecasts. He projected charts on the far screen, projected restitution exposure, litigation risk, deposit sensitivity, regional contraction scenarios. Bars rose in red and amber. Arrows dipped. Analysts had clearly worked fast. Money had its own emergency language, and Warren spoke it fluently. If we continue under Julian's current posture, he said, pointer gliding across the screen, we invite class action clustering, activist pressure, and a probable downgrade in confidence. If instead we isolate branch misconduct, cap voluntary reimbursement, and emphasize leadership transition, we preserve institutional stability. Leadership transition. Camilla heard the phrase for what it was. A coup dressed in business casual. Julian stood with both hands resting on the back of his chair. You are proposing that we protect valuation by minimizing admitted harm. I am proposing survival. Eleanor answered before he could say more. No. You're proposing cosmetic morality. Warren looked almost fond. Eleanor, your flair for melodrama remains intact. And your talent for embalming consequences remains unmatched. One of the outside directors cleared his throat. This is going nowhere. We need emotion. Camilla's phone buzzed in her pocket. Then again. Then again. She ignored it until Eleanor glanced at her with irritation and concern mixed together. Camilla checked the screen and felt the room tilt. The old woman from the ATM had been identified. A reporter had found her. A video clip was spreading of her speaking outside her apartment building, confused, apologetic, saying she never meant to cause trouble and that maybe the nice bank people had only been trying to help. Camilla swore under her breath. Julian noticed instantly. What happened? She handed him the phone. His face hardened line by line as he watched. Warren saw enough to guess opportunity. You see. Public chaos already. Confused witnesses, distorted narratives, uncontrolled sympathy swings. This is exactly why leadership must stabilize the story. Camilla turned on him. She is not the story. She is a person you would rather flatten into footage. Warren spread his hands. And you are helping no one by romanticizing disorder. Romanticizing? She repeated. You think accountability is romantic because you've never had to beg for it. A lawyer started to object. Julian lifted one hand and the lawyer stopped. Camilla did not realize she had moved until she was standing at the end of the board table, palms flat against polished wood that probably cost more than her yearly rent. You want stability? She said. Try building it from trust instead of silence. Try telling customers the truth before they drag it out of you. Try treating the old, the poor, the embarrassed, and the grieving like they count before a camera appears. Nobody interrupted now. Not even Warren. She kept going, because once truth found the right room it refused to shrink politely again. My father died 6 months ago. He never got his money back. But worse than that, he died believing he had failed some test of intelligence because your bank trained people to write him off as low value. Do you understand what that does to a person? To think you were not merely robbed, but officially unworthy of rescue. The quiet that followed had weight. Julian looked at her as if the room had disappeared and only that sentence remained. Warren's voice, when it came, was softer. I'm sorry for your loss. Camilla straightened. You don't get to use sympathy as a substitute for change. Eleanor murmured, almost to herself, there it is. Julian stepped forward then. Not hurried. Not theatrical. Just final. I am calling the vote, he said. Immediate adoption of the remediation framework, permanent abolition of value-tier claims handling, independent restitution authority, publication of district findings, and emergency governance review of all incentive systems tied to vulnerable customer conversions. Warren stared at him. And if the board declines? Julian met his gaze. Then I exercise controlling authority and remove any officer who obstructs implementation. One director blinked. Another looked down. The lawyers stiffened. Power again. Plainly used. Warren sat back slowly, realizing perhaps that he had mistaken restraint for weakness. You'd fracture your own board. Julian's expression did not shift. I'd rather fracture a board than a million households' faith in us. Eleanor smiled then, small and lethal. Motion seconded. The vote moved quickly after that, because courage is contagious but so is fear, and Julian had finally made clear which one would cost more. 2 directors sided with Warren. The rest, whether from conscience or survival instinct, backed the plan. Warren requested his dissent be entered into record. Julian approved it without comment. The meeting adjourned in a silence no one knew how to decorate. As assistants collected papers and legal teams scattered toward the next crisis, Camila stepped away from the table on legs that felt half borrowed. Adrenaline was leaking out of her, leaving only grief and exhaustion and the sharp ache of speaking a dead man's pain aloud in a room that had no right to hold it. Julian followed her into the corridor outside the boardroom. The city spread behind him in blue late-afternoon light, all glass and river and distance. You should sit down, he said. She gave a shaky laugh. That was your line all day. You are very repetitive under stress. He moved closer. Not touching. Never assuming. Camila. Something in the way he said her name undid the last piece of her composure. She looked away. I didn't plan to say that about my father. I know. I don't usually. She exhaled. I don't usually let powerful men watch me break. His answer came quiet and sure. Then don't. Let me watch you stand. She looked at him then, really unable not to. There were 1,000 reasons not to step toward a man like Julian Mercer. His name opened doors and closed arguments. His world was built from private cars, inherited board votes, and choices that cost him less than they cost most people. Men like him made promises in rooms with views and then forgot the neighborhoods beneath them. But this one had walked into branch lobbies in the rain. He had chosen exposure over containment. He had let truth be ugly in public. And when she had slapped him before knowing any of that, he had not punished her for getting it wrong while trying to protect someone weaker than herself. So Camila did the least sensible thing available. She kissed him. It was not polished. It was not tentative either. It tasted like no sleep, cold coffee, and the end of an impossible day. For a second he stayed still in stunned restraint, as though giving her one final chance to reconsider. Then his hand came gently to her waist, not claiming, just steadying, and the kiss deepened with the kind of recognition that made the whole hallway feel suddenly too narrow for what was happening inside it. When they finally pulled apart, both breathing unevenly, Julian touched his forehead lightly to hers. For the record, he murmured, that was better than the slap. Camila laughed against his mouth before she could stop herself. Beyond the glass, evening gathered over the river. Inside, an empire had just chosen reform over concealment, however imperfectly. A dead man's dignity had been spoken aloud where it could no longer be denied. And in the corridor outside the boardroom, with the city opening below them and the future still uncertain enough to be honest, Camila understood that some endings do not arrive as endings at all. They arrive as the first moment you believe repair might be real.